Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whenever the fuck you're tuning in. This is another off-season episode of Backyard Buckets, brought to you by Backyard Sports. I got Bentley with me. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing great, dude. Doing great. It's a wonderful time of year. It's prime golf season. NBA Summer League. The vibes are high, dude. The vibes are high.
Out getting sun and ripping greens, huh?
Yep.
Bob Garris, or Ryan. How you doing, man?
Yeah, artist formerly known as Ryan. Yeah, I'm good. This is one of my favorite times of year, as I've stated before. I really enjoy how every fan base is positive or super negative right now. It's like that 18-year-old we just drafted is our savior or our downfall, and I enjoy that a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Off-season speculation's fun. We get it in every sport, but it feels like with the NBA, once the draft hits, there's a whole lot of this is the next LeBron, this is the next MJ, this is the next Kobe, whatever you have, the next great one, right? And we don't know that, but we are going to talk summer league, and we're going to see if there is anybody you've seen that you're saying, this might be the next great one, or we might have some guys that went in the second round, some undrafted guys that might stick. Bentley, what are your takeaways? Last week we were talking lead up to the Vegas Summer League. Vegas Summer League is the big one, right? There's multiple places that we get games in the offseason, but Vegas is the big one. We got Vic's first game. What are some of your takeaways from Summer League here now that we're about, I think, 9 days into the Summer League?
Yeah, something like that. Summer League is exciting as always. This year there was extra buzz, as we all know, because Vic was there. Also, Scoot and Brandon Miller, I think, they got a lot of burn after draft night. Kind of just a lot of, because they kind of went in flip-flop situations than people sort of expected them to, maybe. So people were going to tune in to see if the Hornets made a mistake taking Miller at 2 and letting Scoot fall. So I think that added to the intrigue as well. But Summer League's awesome, dude. I love Summer League. As I said last week, it's always a good time. It's a lot of fun to see guys that, like, this time last year we were like, oh, this guy's he's gonna get minutes and he's gonna be in the and then we forget, and then it's like, oh wait, this guy again. Like, we get to watch him again. Oh, look, he's dominating and yada yada. So it's just cool from like a nostalgic standpoint as well, as well as the hopeful standpoint too.
Absolutely. So I've got to ask. I know it's way too early, right? We're not going to know for the next 3-4 years, but watching Brandon Miller in the Summer League, the matchups that he's had, I think they've played some decent teams. They've had some matchups that probably tested his mettle a little bit, and he got a lot of notoriety and coverage. Did the Hornets it up, or do you have hope for the Hornets in terms of Brandon Miller and his future?
So I do my best to not really let Summer League sway me one way or another on a prospect, right? I do kind of allow myself to, like, if my thinking aligns one way and then their play aligns with my thinking, I do kind of allow that to bolster my thought about that player, right? And so, excuse me, sorry. I was high on Brandon Miller coming out. I watched a lot of him in college, and I thought he was a stud, as did most people. I never thought that he was going to be a bad NBA player. Had you asked me this the day after the Sacramento Classic or Salt Lake, wherever he played and had like 3 points and 6 fouls or whatever his first game was, that my tone may be a little different. I think that he will pair well with LaMelo Ball. It's tough if egos are going to get in the way. We haven't seen them play together yet, so we don't know if their play style is actually going to work. But just for my speculation, I imagine him being a good fit there. And especially if he can turn his defense up in the NBA, kind of pick up that secondary skill along with his scoring. I think that he could definitely be worthy of the number 2 pick overall, given the playmakers they already have on that team.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I'm still going to, I like Scoot, and I'm going to keep an eye on that kind of matchup. That's going to be, right, that's going to be the comparison going forward, right? Because,
for sure.
even if a Donovan Mitchell is there in the 12th through 18th pick, right, and becomes a superstar, the debate was Brandon Miller or Scoot Henderson, right? So going to keep an eye on that. I liked what I saw from Brandon Miller. Like you said, I just feel like maybe he's kind of what they needed. He's a bit of a natural wing scorer. And if he can turn up the defense, right, that's an added bonus. But they're getting Bridges back, which should help them in terms of on court, right? Obviously, the off court issues are a completely different story. But on court, adding him in addition to another wing with some size and some scoring capabilities. You mentioned LaMelo, and maybe that takes some of the pressure off of him as well and allows him to just be that playmaker that we've seen him. He can do it. He's got good court vision. So. All right, Ryan, what are your thoughts, man? We're a week and a half or so into summer league, and we've had some early overreaction with Vic, especially. Ryan Bentley mentioned the struggles Miller had in his first game, but Vic also struggled a bit to find a rhythm in his first game, and I some talking heads were like, "Oh God, he's just going to be Brad Daugherty, right?" So, what are your thoughts here in terms of summer league? You overreacted on anything yet?
Honestly, if he had Brad Daugherty's career, that's like without the injuries, it's a pretty good outcome. Brad Daugherty was an All NBA player, very before the injuries came in. But I think you'd be happy to get Brad Daugherty or an equivalent talent, before that caught up to him. But yeah, I mean, there's always going to be overreactions. I think Vic had to deal with a lot, like media storm. Britney Spears tried to assault him, and then all the Britney Spears stans tried to destroy him. And that's a powerful army that you have to deal with. And I think that really affected his first game. No, I mean, his season just ended like 3 weeks before the first game. He had to travel to America, deal with like the most media like any 19-year-old probably ever had to deal with. Like, it's understandable the first game was a little rough, and it's understandable that the second game looked a lot better. I think he's got some stuff he's got to learn, like every player that young. Some of the creation stuff, he's got to kind of figure out how that fits into the NBA. But yeah, he looked good. As far as like the rest of summer league goes, what I like is like the second, third year guys really showing the development. For example, my hometown team, Jabari Smith. You're seeing like creation come out of him, right? Because what was he talked about in the draft? It's like he's the ultimate connector piece. He's the 3-and-D guy. He's like, people are like, Brandon Miller is like Jabari Smith, but with like creation potential. And it's like, well, maybe Brandon Miller in year 2 has that creation potential, but right now he doesn't look like he has it, and at least at the level that I think they want. But yeah, I think year 2 and year 3, you really get to see a lot. It's like, hey, the star of your team's not there. We're going to let you take as many shots as you want. The Jalen Williams of the world is another good example. They really were, I think what they wanted to do is be like, what does your pull-up jumper look like? Because that was a weakness in his game last year, and he is good at so many other things. So I really think it's cool to see like, hey, in a vacuum, this guy is really talented. Now in the scheme of the team, he probably isn't going to do those things that often, but it is a weapon that maybe a year or 2, it's like now that's a primary skill set that he has. I think that's really valuable. The rookies, it's such a mess. There's just so much going on. And the guys that were already talented are going to be very obvious. And there's going to be guys that we're like next year, we're going to be like, oh, where did that guy come from? The Dominic Barlows of the world. And I want to give a shout out to Overtime Elite. The Overtime Elite guys look amazing.
Yes.
Dominic Barlow being one of them. The Thompson twins look great. I can't think of his name. I think it's Jalen Martin. Looks really good. I believe that's his name. I think he could be a player in the NBA. Like, that league is showing that like they got some guys, and I think they got some guys coming up. They got a guy going to Kentucky now. Like, that's a legit league, right? They're now going, hey, you don't have to get paid. We can give you you can just do the NIL kind of stuff, and then you can still go to college. I just want to give them a shout out. I think their guys look great. Obviously, if the talent is there, it doesn't matter what competition you're facing. It's there. So, and I think those guys look really good. Barlow is a great example of an undrafted guy who looks like a rotation player for San Antonio. Honestly, right now, he might be their best player in summer league.
I think
there's a
that's the
bunch
luxury
of
San
picks.
Antonio has, right? Because they've stripped it all down and they've got basically bare bones roster, right? They're starting from nobody on the roster is guaranteed to be there in 5 years, except maybe like Vic, right? And in their other draft picks too, they're going to try to develop them, but they are wide open for guys to make that roster. And I think, Barlow being one of those that could certainly. I was impressed, and I have to eat a little crow, I think, because I mentioned the competition level, right? When talking about in the draft preview, I mentioned the competition level of some of the overtime elite folks. I wasn't sure how that would translate. Now I know summer league, they're playing other rookies. They're playing second and third year guys. They're not playing the 8-10 year vets in the NBA, but both the Thompson twins look good. I thought, I thought Asar was going to be potentially a better pro, but if I'm a Rockets fan, I'm really encouraged from what I saw from Amin Thompson, because what you thought he could be coming from overtime elite looks like that's what he's going to be in the NBA, right? And of course, as we step up in competition, we're going to see if that does truly translate. But he looked like the most athletic guy on the floor, in the game that I watched the most of them play. We were talking about it in chat, was the one that I saw them the most time with them, and he looks the part. I've liked what I've seen from a lot of the top 10 picks as well. It's not just those guys, but the top 10 picks, it seems that they have delivered right on some of the expectations in summer league. So it's going to be exciting to see them progress forward into the season. So summer league's exciting. You guys have mentioned a lot of the reasons, but it is interesting to see how things translate from a different game in college, or these guys that are going to the G League or overtime elite, some of these other alternative leagues, or coming over from Europe, and how they adjust to the NBA, right? The size of the floor, the size of the court, the distance shots are taken, right? Because the 3-point line's in additional, I think it's 3 feet difference between college and NBA, and then Europe, it's like what, 1.5 feet or something like that difference in terms of the length of the shot. So seeing how that translates and seeing these guys, it is exciting to see some of these young bucks deliver. And God, I always love the undrafted story. A guy comes out, he produces, and he might end up sticking on a roster. It's always great to see that. We talked about Miami a lot with all their undrafted players. The story's just great, right? You overcome odds. And Shibway's another one, I think, one undrafted. I think he has shown throughout the summer league that I think he's got potential to stick, right? I know I've talked a bit about him with you guys. I think he's another one as an undrafted guy that could stick as well. So those are the things I really like seeing about summer league, the offseason, how guys are going to fill out rosters, who's going to stick in a rotation, who's going to stick at the end of a roster and maybe turn into a guy in year 3 or 4. So good stuff. All right, well, let's shift gears here from the summer league and let's start talking way too early predictions for the upcoming NBA season. So we're going to look at win totals in the Western Conference. So this week we're looking Western Conference. Next week we're going to talk Eastern Conference. And I want to start from the bottom up. And the text difference, just for those out there that are watching, red text means they're predicted to finish below 500. The green text means they're predicted to finish above 500. So it looks like, according to DraftKings odds, that the Western Conference is going to be really, really competitive from top to bottom, just going on odds here, in terms of the projections for over under, with 11 of the 13 teams that we have on here, or 10 of the 13, because 2 teams from the Western Conference don't have lines yet. Health, trade potential, those sorts of things. But DraftKings in Vegas haven't published lines for the Blazers or the Clippers. So what we're going to do here, we're going to start with the Spurs. So the Spurs, we all know, right? Tear down, tank for Vic, worked out in their favor. DraftKings right now, the line is 30.5 wins. Ryan, I want to start with you. What are your thoughts here on this number? Is it good? Is it too low, too high? What do you think?
Yeah, this one gave me some trouble. I think I would take the under probably. That's an 8-game improvement from last year, which is a lot. They definitely got some NBA guys coming in, the Chetty Osmonds of the world, and Sandro Mamukalashvili. I love that guy. Reggie Bullock.
Name team.
I mean, Bullock and Osman, of course, definitely NBA guys, right? My concern with them is where's the creation come from, and I think that's really going to limit them offensively.
Well, they
They
have an
were
all-pro point guard, so I mean,
well, yeah,
first team NBA.
yeah, for sure. Uh, they got a lot of names of like young guys. I think they're going to be way better defensively because it's hard to be worse than they were defensively. I think they were like the worst defense in the league last year by quite a wide margin, including the Rockets. and I think like Sohan and him getting more playing time and Vic, just he's going to have a defensive impact right away. I think, but I don't know like where do they score is going to be the tough part. It's a lot of self creation. A lot of these guys are not self creating. Malachi Branham thinks he is. He's not. I don't think he's. I think he'll be fine. He's just not. He's not. They're not going to be efficient offensively. And the West is so tough. I think they're going to lose a lot of games just against way better talent. And it's really going to come down to do they beat the Rockets consistently? If they win the Rockets series, they probably beat that number. But if they lose the Rocket series, they probably lose that number. And I'm going to say they lose that series because I think the Rockets are better right now. And so I'm going to take the under, even though I like them a lot. I like the 19,000 people they have on their team.
Bentley, what do you think? You agree or disagree?
Yeah, I agree with the under. Despite having an All NBA point guard and a bust at the number 1 overall pick, like they just don't have the talent up and down the roster to win that many games. Also, it's sort of based off the confidence I have in Pop getting that big, massive extension. Not that he was going to be fired or anything, but like this is him signing up for the long haul. Whether that's on the bench the whole time or like working as the president, like a Pat Riley role kind of for him, and doing, kind of handpicking his next coach, I guess is the word. He's there for the long haul. He knows this is going to be a slow burn. They got picks coming, I believe, the next 2 years from Atlanta in the DeJounte Murray trade. They have picks coming in the future from the Murray trade that I think he's going to want his fingers all over. Maybe, Cooper Flagg, who knows, one of the Boozer twins. Regardless, I think this number goes under. They just don't, like Ryan said, they don't have the playmaking to really run like a real offense there. But they will be better defensively. That's my guess.
Yeah, I agree with both of you on the under. I think it's going to be sort of tight with that number, maybe 28, 29 wins. I think, Ryan, the Rockets series, you mentioned it as a swing series. It's going to be one of those series against these lower tier teams that is going to be the swing for them in terms of how they finish the season. Bentley, I like the point you made about Pop, right? The long term, he's here. I always thought that was going to be the natural transition for him anyway to like a Pat Riley role. I thought it was going to be like a year or two ago, and I thought it was going to be Becky Hammon, but obviously that ship has sailed. She's moved on to her own thing, but he's going to want to handpick his coach. He's going to want to do what Riley did with Spo and build keep the culture going there in San Antonio because they've already got a culture there.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as he's around, that culture is not going to change, and he's going to try to make sure that continues down. I think they're going to be in the news all the time, obviously, because of Vic. But I think they're going to be in the news all year because they're going to be posturing for next year, the year after, and the year after. Right? There's going to be a lot of like potential trades and moves of guys. You mentioned the all-pro point guard. He might be on the move at some point this season if they can find a suitor for him that's looking for some help there. Some of these guys that are, year 2, year 3 guys, maybe they're pieces that someone else can make use of, that sort of thing. I think the Spurs are going to be, and maybe even eventually in facilitating, Ryan, you mentioned it last week, facilitating the Dame move, right? It could be something like that. But I think the Spurs, they're going to be interesting all year for a number of reasons. And then, of course, going forward, what is Pop's role with this team? But I've got the under. They're not going to score enough. I just think that it's going to be a really heavy focus for them on making Vic the best pro he can possibly be, right? They're gonna cut off their nose to spite their face to make sure that Vic is the best Vic he can be going forward. And if that means losing 60 games this year, then they're going to lose 60 games this year to make sure that happens.
Can I address what Aaron said here in the chat?
Absolutely.
Well, brought it up, made it easy on me. Yeah,
Yep.
I think they actively tanked. I completely agree. But like, what was their ceiling last year? 26 wins, like best case scenario.
Did you get in the low 30s, maybe?
With DeJounte Murray, it's probably in like the 35 range.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Like a 3-win player is a ton. Like a guy swinging 3 wins is a ton. Like there's guys who are like, if you sign this guy, you'll win 52 games next year. It's like we won 40.
Yeah.
It's not. It's like there's like no one that does that. Like it's a lot. So if they're 25, that means they're 6 wins away. I don't think Vic gives you 6 wins. I don't think Oswin gives you 6 wins. I think some of those are more lateral experience movements, which I think are good. They're really bad defensively, like around the perimeter.
Also think the active tanking also contributed to the fact that this is a pretty barren roster right now, right? Like we're not going to fool anybody and say that the Spurs have one of the 15 best rosters in basketball, right? Maybe even top 20 roster in basketball. But what they do have is long-term potential, and that's what they're building toward. That's what Pop is aware of that they need to get, because he was there for the Duncan and Robinson and building that dynasty that it became with TP and Manu and et cetera on down the line with all of the role players that they brought in as well. You've got to have a core of stars, and right now the number one consideration is Trey Jones going to be that guy for them? No, is Vic going to be that superstar for them going forward? And that's what they tanked for. And I think this year and probably next year, Spurs fans, unfortunately, and Aaron, he's from the San Antonio area. We talk about the Roadrunners all the time during college football. But unfortunately, I think for Spurs fans, the reality of the fallout from that active tanking is that they're going to have a bad year this year, a bad year next year. But that's going to get you more assets, right? It's going to get you more draft assets. It's going to get you better picks. It's going to get you those guys that you can move. Maybe you move some of those picks and bring in guys that can complement Vic. If he becomes that guy in year 1 or 2, you've hit a fucking grand slam, and then you go out and you start building around him. Who doesn't want to play with that fucking guy if he delivers on the potential that everybody thinks he has?
Yeah. I think
go ahead, Ryan.
I just want to add one thing. I think if you were to take like the young bad teams and like be like, who has the best core, like before the season, right? We're talking about like progressive cores. San Antonio might be the worst of like the young teams.
Yeah.
So I know that progression as a player and as a team is not linear. It's not like we have the best young guys. So we're like Orlando's got all the really that's clearly not how it works. There's so many variables that exist. Yeah. But if we were going to off of a prediction model without Vic, they look terrible. Really bad. Keldon Johnson's an NBA player. I love Keldon Johnson. I've talked about if he could like shoot a little bit better, I'd love it. But I mean, just a great slasher. They got guys. It's just that's a lot to move. And unless Vic is transcendent relatively quickly, that's a big number to jump up. Even with a great coach. But what's better than a great coach is great talent.
Yeah, for sure. Bentley, you got anything to add?
Yeah, I just have a couple thoughts. We won't dwell on the Spurs for too much longer, even though I know a Spurs fan is among us.
Yeah.
I've heard rumblings on the Twitter sphere of people comparing what the Spurs are doing to what Philly did in that active tanking, right?
Yeah.
I can understand the comparison. However, there's one major difference in that they have a coach who's done this before, right? Yeah. People love to bring up, and Gary, you did it too, and I'm not faulting you for this because it's accurate. They tanked to get Tim Duncan. Like they did. Yeah. They tanked to get Tim Duncan.
Yep.
So they have a coach, unlike Philly, who did all the tanking. They have a coach who's done this and was able to rebuild them almost instantly, right?
David Robinson's injury could not have come at a more fortuitous time for that team.
Exactly.
And then get Tim Duncan.
Yeah, like could they have brought him back? Probably. But did they need to?
They weren't going to.
Yeah, exactly. Like they weren't going to do that. So to me, there's the huge difference between what people are saying is the new process in San Antonio is that they have a coach who has done this before. He's taken an active tanking team and built a culture around the brand new guy they brought in first year, played winning basketball, and so on and so forth. Also, We all know that Tim Duncan's a big island guy, loves islands. He's the BVI, I believe, is where he's from. They had Boris Diaw, who like sails around the world, big water guy. So to me, Reggie Bullock was just destined to be a San Antonio Spur because I don't know if you guys know this, but the man owns an island off the coast of Belize and is building a homestead there. So to me, Reggie Bullock was the signing of the offseason that should have been talked about way before, but he was a natural born Spur just due to his water nature.
Sky's the limit for Reggie Bullock.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a good nuance to point out, right? The process is easy to kind of point to because one, there was a fucking cliche or a catchphrase for it, right? Trust the process. And the Sixers were so obvious about it, and they did it for so fucking long. It took them 8 years to finally finish the process, and they haven't even gotten a title out of it, right? They've gotten some really good teams and some deep playoff run, but you put it perfectly, right? The difference between that, which is something I have equated it to, every time a team tanks, you harken back to the process, right? It's cheap, it's easy, it's cheeky, but this is a team that, as you put it, they did this before, and they made a dynasty out of it.
Yep.
Right? So Spurs fans, whatever cliche you want to put on it, just trust this process.
Yes. Trust in Pop, dude. Trust the Popsis.
Oh, yes. All right. So let's move on. We've got some in-house talk here with the Rockets. Vegas has them at 31.5. We've already talked a little bit about them in terms of the Summer League review. This is a decent 27 wins last year, Ryan. Is that what it was?
22.
That's right. They had the best odds. That's right. This would be a 9 or 10 win, right? Improvement just to get at their number here. What do you think? I'm going to start with you, Ryan. This is your team. This is a team that's exciting because I think they got a steal late in the first round, right, with Cam. And obviously we already talked about Amen and how he kind of looked here in the Summer League. What are you looking with this team? Are you thinking they're going to double-digit improvement this year?
Yeah, they're really tough. They might be one of the toughest lines to guess. Before I saw the line, I said, what would be a good season? Like, what would the team? Probably like 32 wins, like 33. Like, that's probably like the team would probably be like, hey, we built something that like next year might like sneak into the playoffs, right? Mm-hmm. I think there has to be crazy outliers for them to get in this year. Like it would be crazy, like injuries or like a team just like falls apart, right? And then I said like, what's a bad year? Probably like below 27. So that's like right in the middle of like those things. I would probably take the under if I was going to guess, but I would not bet that line because I feel like it's like a pretty solid line. Like if it just from what would I do with that?
Yeah.
I think that's pretty like spot on. I think their ceiling is just barely above that, and I think their floor is just barely below that. So I think it's a good number. And they're hard to know, right? There's so much changeover on that team. And again, is the development going to be there like we think it is? If it is, then maybe they are a 32, 33, like 34 crazy number of wins. But the West is so tough.
Yeah.
They're so competitive. The conference matters so much more than like the division did way back in the day. Yep. They play way more in the conference, and that conference is just killer. We don't even have the Clippers on here, and the Clippers might be a top five team in the NBA.
Right. They're potentially going to host the first round series.
Like they're going to sneak up on some people, right? Like it's basketball. They're going to. Just Spurs will too. The Spurs are going to beat they might beat the Nuggets, and everyone's like, oh, like, wow, how'd they do that? Victor's better than Jokic, like something stupid like that. Like it's going to happen because it's basketball and shots fall some nights, but I would take the under. And I hate to say that because I think 32 is a good season, but that's just like if you're like, hey, it's a good season. If we do half a win over what the line is, then you probably should take the under. That's
so opinionated question for you. I noticed this line in my head, for some reason, I thought it was a 7-win improvement, but it's a 10-win improvement, right? That's a much bigger number than 7 wins. And 7 wins is a big number for a team that didn't go out and make a splash free agency move, a team that didn't go out and or doesn't have a superstar, right, coming back from injury, that sort of thing. Those are usually things that like shift a line like that, right? The Heatles getting together, that changed the entire trajectory for the Heat, right? How much of this line movement for this team do you think has to do with Udoka?
I think that's part of it. I think people are really high on Udoka. I think it's hard to judge him off one season
Yeah.
with some of the best talent in the league on his
Right,
roster.
right.
Like I have no doubt he's probably a good coach. Especially defensively, and I think he did a lot of really interesting things with like Robert Williams and kind of like the free safety role that Robert Williams played. And we saw kind of the struggles of that after he left, like not really adapting well. I think he'll be good. I don't think a coach is ever going to move a team 9 wins. There's no coach
not in one season, right?
When Tex Winter, he didn't invent the triangle offense, but he heavily influenced it. He did not move the Michael Jordan Bulls into a championship with his triangle offense. Yes, were they better with it? But they were a championship team because of the players, and they figured it out with the coach. Obviously, he was not the head coach, but he influenced Phil Jackson to do the triangle. But what I'm saying is I don't think Udoka is at the level of a Tex Winter triangle offense where he's going to heavily influence it in any way. But yeah, I think if they have great linear improvement, sure, they reach the peak. But again, there's no way to know. Jabari Smith could be awful.
Yeah.
I mean, he just might be shooting, but he might be shooting out of his mind because of summer league. Yeah. I think there's guys that are good, but like Jalen Green might not develop. He might just be a chucker. Like that's a very possible out. And then they're bad.
Yeah.
Because they're playing 38 minutes of a chucker and Fred VanVleet, and who's also a little bit of a chucker sometimes. It's like they might be efficiency might be terrible. They're gonna have nights where they like crush people, but they're gonna also like put up like 85 points one night, and you're gonna be like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I found it kind of perplexing to think about. Like the last time we saw Ime Udoka, it was really good, right? But it was also the only time we saw Ime Udoka running a team, and he inherited a team that was ready-made, right? Yep, they made it to the finals. Yep, they pushed the Warriors, right? And they had a real opportunity to win a championship. But that was, for all intents and purposes, that was Brad Stevens's ready-made team when he moved to the front office. Of course, it was built mostly by somebody else, right? Ainge and whatnot. But Stevens was the guy who kind of built the culture and the play style for that team. And Udoka came in, obviously made some changes defensively. So I was intrigued how much, if you had the opportunity to pick the brain of whoever sets these lines, how much did Ime Udoka influence this? 7 wins is a lot to ask for a coach. 7 to 10, right? Even if you think they drafted super well, 10 wins is a lot just to think that a coach is going to come in and change that. All right, Bentley, what are your thoughts here on the Rockets?
So I thought I was going to be sneaky and take a different approach than y'all and bring up the Ime Udoka thing, but you guys.
Sorry, I ruined that.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I can go a different direction with this.
Can't catch me sleeping.
Well, you didn't bring it up. Gary did, so try again.
Gary's wide awake.
So I have the under. 10 wins is a lot for a team that is super young. And like I said previously, I try not to allow the summer league to influence the way that I think about a player one way or the other. It just can reaffirm my thinking there, right? Jabari Smith, I don't think is a star in the NBA. I think he's a good player. I kind of have the same thought about Keegan Murray in Sacramento, who put up 41 in a summer league game. It's like, oh, that kid can be really good. Probably not a star. I could be totally wrong. Jabari Smith could come out and light it up this year. And I hope he does, because that's a win for the SEC, and we always take those. Shout out Bruce Pearl. But here in my notes, I have 11 bullets for the Summer League. One of them is the entire Rockets team. So despite me thinking that they are a winner in the Summer League, I still don't think they're going to be a good team next year. Definitely not a 10-win improvement team next year. The West, like Ryan said, is so tough. And they're going to be playing against guys that have so much more experience and know-how of winning that I just don't think they. I think they improve. I think they probably win like 27 games, but I don't think they win 32 or over 31 and a half. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I'm right about that number too, Bentley. 27, 28, 29. And if they get to 30, it's a great year, right?
Yeah.
And I shouldn't say great because obviously going 30 and 52 is not a great year per se, right? But I think Houston understands where they're at. I think rational Houston fans know where they're at, right? They are building towards something. And if you win, I said rational Houston fans.
Championship or bust, baby.
Yeah, right. But you're building towards something, right? And if you get to 28, 29, 30 wins this year, you make a 6 to 8 win improvement over last season. You got to feel really good because that means that maybe Jabari, Smith is a better shooter than he showed last year, right? Or a better offensive player than he showed last year. Maybe that means Amin Thompson is in contention for rookie of the year and he's the playmaker you think he is, right? And then maybe that means a guy like an MPJ shows some maturity and becomes a contributor. That means Fred VanVleet has maybe changed the locker room, those sorts of things. And you start to look, hey, what's that mean for us next year and the year after and the year after? So I'm still on the under. I just don't see 10 wins, right, as that level of improvement. But I'm with Bentley, 27, 28. I think that was kind of your floor that you had there, Ryan. So I'm right in that area. 27, 28 wins, I think, is what we're going to see from Houston. All right, moving up the scale here, the Utah Jazz, who beat their number last year, and they beat their number early last year. Vegas clearly underestimated them last year. They've got them at 34.5 this year. Bentley, I'm going to start with you. Is this a disrespectful number again for the Utah Jazz?
Disrespectful number. I don't think it's disrespectful to the Utah Jazz. I think it's respectful to the rest of the Western Conference. This is going to be a common theme throughout the rest of this pod, that the West is very competitive and the West is tough. There's a lot of good players and a lot of good teams. But just given the number being at 34.5 and them surpassing that last year, my guess is that they go over it again this year. I wouldn't be shocked if they have the exact same record as they had last year. 37 wins feels like the correct number. Depending on the mental state of Lauri Markkanen when he comes back from the war-torn country of wherever the fuck in Eastern Europe he's at, it wouldn't shock me if he has another, all-star, borderline all-star season. The kid can flat out play. Walker Kessler has another year of being really of progressing. I would have loved to see him play Summer League. Thought that would have been cool to play with like his new teammates, right? I think we all really liked their draft night too, if I'm remembering correctly. I think we all kind of had them as a winner. Keontae George looks like a stud. The dude can fill it up from pretty much anywhere on the court. So I'm taking the over. I think that they're going to be I think that they're not going to be a bad team. I also think they have a really good coach. He was supposed to coach Boston, and then Ryan's now head coach Ime Udoka kind of closed that door for him. But what are you going to do? I take the over. I think Utah is going to be pretty good. They're definitely be a fun team. That's going to be one of my league pass teams for sure. Like to tune into that. Take the over. Lay the juice. Whatever you got to do.
Excellent. Ryan, you agree? Disagree?
Yeah, I think I agree about the over. I think the 3 through 5 position for Utah might be one of the deepest in the league. Like they can throw a lot of 6'10" guys at you just over and over again. Some of them can handle the ball even, with like Markkanen showing some ball handling and creation off the dribble capabilities. I think bringing back Jordan Clarkson was a big move for them from like a raising the floor perspective because their backcourt's pretty small and pretty selfish as far as their play styles go. Colin Sexton being part of that. Clarkson is too, but at least Clarkson got 4.5 assists last year. Like he's moving the ball a little bit, right? And he can fill it up. And he's got some size, right? Sexton doesn't have that size. So I like the team. The backcourt just concerns me a little bit. Keontae George is probably not going to be a big contributor right away. I mean, it's just how the NBA is. And that I talked about it before, but what they need is creation, self-creation, and guys who can get other people involved. And I just don't know if they have that yet, but they're huge. And all their guys can score. Even Walker Kessler has shown some capability to score the ball in limited capabilities. So I really like their front court. If they just get a little bit of development and consistency from Clarkson, I think they'll reach that number. So I like the over as well.
Yeah, I'm over on this. I'm actually a little more bullish on the Jazz. I really like that roster. I like what they've got. I think they're going to struggle a little at point guard, but I look at one of their signings from the offseason and I'm hopeful, right? He may not deliver on what I need him to for them to get to the number I think they're going to get to, but I like the Chris Dunn signing because he's a big guy who can be, a little bit of help there at the guard position, a playmaker in his past life, right? When he was healthy and playing the game. If he can stay on the court, stay healthy, stay engaged, I think he can be a helper, a difference maker for them, kind of a yin to Jordan Clarkson's yang. I'm going to knock on wood and say that he's going to play a good majority of the season and he's going to be a big help for them. And I love the you mentioned it, the length, the depth. Bentley, you mentioned it 3 through 5, the depth in terms of how good they are. I'm worried a little bit about the Hendrickson injury from the summer league and him not playing, but he's young. Eventually, or Hendricks, sorry, not Hendricks. We were talking about Hendricks in the office today, but Taylor Hendricks. I'm worried about his injury.
New Orleans Saints.
Yes, not the Raiders, but
not the Raiders.
I think Ted, his father, probably played. Whatever. Anyway, I'm worried a little bit about that injury. Sensabaugh seems to have the same sort of injury history he had at Ohio State. But I do like what they bring to the table. I'm actually close to 500. I'm at 40 or 41 wins for the Jazz. I think they beat this number. I think they kind of blow it out of the water. And I think that we're going to be talking about Utah in potentially a play-in position for the postseason this year. And I do think we're going to start seeing Lauri Markkanen really be a fringe superstar in this league. With the way that this offense kind of runs through him, he has a lot of opportunity to do that. And he's a very efficient player. So I'm bullish on the Jazz. I know I'm maybe too bullish, but I really like what they've done. And I'm going to count on Chris Dunn playing for them this season and being a good complement to some of the, other guards that they do have on this roster. If all that comes together, I've got the Jazz at 40, 41 wins and sniffing potential play-in position.
One of the things that the Jazz do have going for them is that their team faces so many less distractions than the rest of the league because they don't have internet yet in Salt Lake City.
Or booze.
Yeah, shout out Vernon Maxwell.
Yeah, I think the John Collins thing has to be brought up too, right? Like that, makes them quiet a bit better. I know he's a little redundant to some extent with like Markkanen, but if you're like, let's just play 2 Markkanens, like one better Markkanen and one slightly worse Markkanen, like that's pretty good. I think people like kind of, and I thought it was a weird trade too, like because they're so deep at those positions. But Hendricks is probably not a contributor this year.
Probably not
right away. He probably gets like a few minutes here and there. John Collins is a legit, like, at some points in his career, fringe all-star player. Like, and I think still has it. So I think that's going to probably give him a win or two just better than last year right there. And even if they shoot worse than last year, that should kind of level that out. So they should end up at least, in my opinion, roughly where they were last year.
Yep. All right, let's slide up here to the teams that Vegas and DraftKings have finishing over 500 here. OKC. Obviously, the big news for them in the offseason is the fact that Chet Holmgren is healthy and playing summer league games. Looked a little tight early, but seems to be kind of settling in and playing much better, looking a little more like the Chet of old. And you may not be able to tell it by looking at him, but he put on, I think it was 19 pounds this offseason. Of course, on a 7'3" frame, it's hard to notice when you add one deck chair to the Titanic. It's hard to notice. But OKC's young. They're exciting. They've been building a really good young core. I think we talked about it around draft time about how this is sort of how the whole process worked out for them, right? Sam Presti just give me all the assets, give me all of them. Draft capital, give me all these young players. I'm going to draft guys in the middle and late first round with these draft picks that I've gotten back, and I'm going to turn them into stars, fringe stars potentially in the league. We Josh Giddey was a huge hit for them. Let's see. I started with Bentley first last time. So, Ryan, let's go your way first this time. What do you think about OKC here? Vegas seems pretty optimistic, 42.5 wins for them. And you're a little blurry there, but it's all good.
We prefer it that way.
OKC?
Every time I get too close to the they adjust. There we go. Perfect. Let me stop. So the problem with OKC right now is they got like 21 NBA players on their team right now.
Yeah,
it's gonna be really interesting to see how they figure that out. That's gonna, I think, influence a lot. A lot of those guys aren't gonna play, obviously, but I think that's like the interesting offseason they have left, and they have a ton of guys like 25 and under still. Like Shea's 25, which is crazy.
Yeah,
and the rest
seems like he's been in the league for 2 decades.
Yeah, I would probably take the over on him. Again, I don't think improvement is lateral, but I think they have so many guys. The variables are less because they are taking so many bullets and so many darts, some might say, and throwing a bunch at the wall. It's like eventually like half those guys are going to pan out over time, and maybe it's not the guy that it was last year. Maybe it's a different guy this year. Right? Maybe it's maybe Poku finally figures it out, but like they have so many different options. I think it would be hard for them not to be better than last year, in my opinion. Just as long as the coach is willing to make the right personnel decisions, and the GM, of course, I think they'll be better. And Chet, I think, is going to add probably a game or two to their win total because defensively they'll be so tough. I think he's a lot better defensively than people are giving him credit for because of they focus on the offensive game.
Yeah, for sure. Bentley, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with the over. If they won 50 games, I wouldn't be shocked. I know it's a big jump, and we mentioned with Houston that theirs is a 10-game line. That would be 7. Give me 2 seconds. It'd be another 10-game improvement, actually.
Yeah.
But they shut down Shea last year. We knew that they were kind of tanking a little bit. And they do have 1,000 draft picks coming up the next 7 years or whatever. So they have an All-NBA guy in Shea. They have a guy who's looking to make probably an all-defensive team in Chet. And then they have Jalen Williams, who is freaking awesome. Not the Arkansas one, the Santa Barbara. The one from California.
Santa Clara.
Santa Clara. Yeah, the one from California, dude. That guy. Who looks like a freaking tank, dude. I don't know if you've seen the pictures of him in the gym this offseason.
Yeah.
And then Josh Giddey, who, like, I love Josh Giddey. The dude, I think he's phenomenal. He's almost as good as Denny Avdia, which is crazy. But, like...
Jim Rat, coach.
Yeah. No, I think he's a stud. I think he's the perfect guy to play off of Shea. And then Lou Dort, just putting people in the torture chamber in the perimeter. He's a stud on defense. I think their team is really good. And like Ryan said, they have a ton of guys who could contribute to this team, may not necessarily contribute right away. One of the guys I have on my list from the Summer League notes I have is Cason Wallace. We kind of mentioned in our pre-draft or post-draft that Kentucky players have a way about them of blossoming when they come into the NBA. Now he's a little redundant, I think, for what they have on their roster already.
Yeah.
But for those of not me, because I didn't like the pick, but for those of you all that liked the pick on draft night, I think that the Summer League has been promising. What you expect to see from Cason Wallace, and I think Mark Degnault or whatever their coach's name is. I can never pronounce the thing. I think he's probably an underrated coach in the league this year. What he did with that team last year was pretty impressive. until Sam Presti told him to stop winning games. So I would definitely take the over. I think their ceiling is probably like 50 wins, to be honest, if they try to compete the entire year and don't shut down some of their players.
Yeah, I like the over as well. I'm not going 50, but I look in the 44, 46 range. I think in a very competitive West. I look at some of the teams above them, not to to give away spoilers or anything, but I look at a few of the teams above them, and I've got them regressing from their numbers. So I look at OKC and I say, okay, there's 4 or 5 wins for me to tally in their favor to get them to that 44, 46, maybe as many as 47 win. And you look at a team over the course of an 82-game season, right? The difference between 46 and 50 wins can be a bounce here or there on any given night. So I don't think 50 is a stretch, right? I agree with Bentley that I think 50 could be the ceiling for a team that has a lot of promise, but I'm not myself gonna say 50 wins there, but I am gonna take the over as well. And you mentioned Dort. Dort's one of my favorite players for the same reason that Desmond Bane is one of my favorite players in the league. I love guys that scrap on defense and can knock down shots. Sort of the way in a much smaller way. It's the way that I played basketball. When I would play. So I think I latch on to guys like Bruce Bowen and Lou Dort and Desmond Bane, who obviously Bane's a much more complete offensive player. But so I love that the roster composition. I think 20 NBA guys on one roster is certainly a tough conundrum to deal with, but it's also possibly a good one to have. And maybe right if they're threatening 50 wins this year, maybe we finally see Presti use some of those assets to go get a guy at the deadline that could make this team a now contender. Maybe defensively, I do think that they are going to be even better with Chet back there as the back line enforcer. I think he's athletic enough to defend on the perimeter and not be a liability when you run in those pick and rolls. A lot of those guys, like you look at Rudy Gobert, right? We talked about him. He's a liability. You just take him away from the rim, he's a liability. Chet's not that guy, much the same way that people talk about like Vic, right? I think those guys are athletic enough to make up for any of those kind of schemes that you have at the top of the key offensively to get them out of position. So 44 to 46, maybe they get up to the 47 range, but I'm definitely with you guys on the over for them. Just looking especially too, right? You guys mentioned the actively kind of pulling back at the end of last season. I think that just from that perspective, they could be a better team this year if they play the whole season. All right, moving up the scale here, we've got the Pelicans at 43.5. I think Vegas is kind of hedging a little bit with this number in terms of Zion and how much he's going to play this year. This to me feels like a line set with question marks around one of the most electrifying players in the league, one of the superstars when he plays in this league, because I would have expected this number if the line makers went into the season thinking that New Orleans was going to have Zion for a good bulk of the season, 60 to 70 games. Obviously, they're going to load manage and whatnot. But if they expected Zion to play the whole season, I would have thought this line would be closer to like 46.5. So, Bentley, I'm going to go your way first. What are your thoughts on the Pelicans here? Do you feel similarly, differently? Is this line right, or are we kind of feeling some of that Zion effect here?
I think the line definitely reflects Vegas hedging the Zion effect, his injury effect, which is why this one was so difficult for me. This one probably was the most difficult for me in the Western Conference so far. Well, definitely so far. Maybe like the entire Western Conference, right? I've told the story on here before about me watching Zion's very first game at Duke and calling my dad directly after and saying that this kid is something that we've never seen before, right? And I don't think that was hyperbolic of me in the moment to say that, and I still believe that to this day. But with each passing season, the shine kind of wears off, right? New kids come to the league, players in his class flash guns, and then some get better. It
some help their teams win a playoff series.
Yes, some might do that. That'd be crazy though, right? It'd be wild. I really, really, really want to go over here, but I can't do it. I'm taking the under for the simple fact that who knows if Zion is going to play? Who knows? I don't know. This is a line I would not bet.
Right.
I wouldn't put money on this one way or the other. Unless they give me plus money for the under, then I might take that. But I have
is always tempting.
Yeah, dude. I don't have a lean one, and I obviously I'm not an insider here. I just don't have a lean one way or the other whether Zion is going to play 60 games. Like that would be incredible if he plays 60 games. I would love that, right? But for that reason, I'm taking the other as much as I like Brandon Ingram.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump exactly what you said, right? I wouldn't bet this line because it's a scary number if Zion plays. But I would bet the under if I was forced to bet a number here for the exact reason you said, right? I don't know whether I'm going to get 20 or I'm going to get 60 games out of Zion. The reports I'm hearing this offseason that, like, he's kind of nowhere to be found. They don't know what he's doing. He's supposed to be training, but there's reports that he's overweight again and all the Instagram craziness with the porn star, and it just feels like this is a guy who maybe he has figured it out and he's quiet this offseason because he's in the lab, but it definitely feels like, at least on the surface, that this is a guy who hasn't, and he may never figure it out, honestly. Yeah, right. Good fucking luck. Good fucking luck.
70 wins over under. Excuse me, 70 games over under.
Yeah, right. Combined. Ryan, what are your thoughts on New Orleans here? Any difference of opinion? Any dissenting thoughts here?
I think I agree that I think the line is tough to bet at all. I think I would take the over. I like this team even without Zion. I think their floor is really high. They have a lot of shooting and a lot of defense, especially perimeter defense. Valanciunas is not the greatest rim protector in the world, but their perimeter defense is really good. I mean, you go down Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Alvarado, Dyson Daniels, who I think is going to contribute a lot this year. CJ McCollum's a little bit of a concern defensively, but they can, their rotation of players on the perimeter is going to give a lot of teams a lot of trouble. People are going to shoot poorly against them, I think, and they're going to beat some teams just off that. I think a lot of games, and they're going to score enough. Trey Murphy is super efficient. McCollum very efficient. Brandon Ingram, I love Brandon Ingram. I love watching him play, but it just sometimes I feel like he's just not contributing a ton. If he's not scoring, it's like he rebounds a little bit. That's not much else. A little bit of creation for other people.
Doesn't he at times feel like New York Knicks Carmelo Anthony?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes, yeah. It feels like empty calories. Sometimes.
Didn't he have the most garbage time points of any player in the league last year?
He did. Of anybody that scored, I think over 25 a game, he had the most garbage time points. So games are getting blown out. He was putting up numbers, and I don't blame him. I would too. If it's like, hey, I averaged 26 a game. Give me my money. But no, I like this team in a vacuum, even without Zion. I think they could potentially hit that number without him, and maybe that's probably a hot take for a lot of people. But I really like this team. They're better defensively without Zion. They're worse offensively, obviously, especially near the basket. But Valanciunas, really good offensive player. They're going to be able to score on people. There's games Valanciunas puts up like 25, and it's like super efficient, and you're like, oh, wow, that's like a legit center. People forget how good he was in Toronto.
Yeah, it reminds you of what he used to be,
Yeah, he can still play. I just think they're gonna beat a lot of people, and I think they're gonna kill the bad teams. Because the bad teams are already going to be inefficient, generally speaking, and they're going to make them way more inefficient. And defense is going to win them a lot of games. And if Zion plays, I mean, I think it's a smash. Obviously, even if you get 50 games out of them, like a bad year, like I think they still beat the over. That's my opinion. I like New Orleans a lot. I really like the roster they've constructed. I think they've done a good job, and I think those guys develop into a competent team.
Yeah, it's hard to trade Anthony Davis, right? One of the 2 to 5 best players in all of the league, and then in the in 4 years, 3 years from then, say that you might have won that trade because he's been in street clothes basically the entire time he's been in LA, with the exception of like the bubble.
Yeah, they won a title, so
they did win a title, right? So it's hard to, right? Obviously, with the bubble year that they won the title, the Lakers won that trade, right? But you look at the talent that they did get back; they didn't get fleeced. They didn't get fleeced, despite having their hand forced by a player, which often leads to a team getting fleeced. They did not get fleeced, and they've assembled some good talent there with the picks and the players that they've kept. Obviously, not every player from that trade is still on the team, but yeah, if Zion plays, that number's an easy over. But I don't know, maybe Bentley and I are a little more skittish about that roster than you are, Ryan, and that's fair. I like that take. Defensively, you make a good point. They're going to be really good defensively. They are a good defensive team. All right, shifting farther up the scale here, not wins wise, but alphabetical order here. Just not because the Kings are. I don't know what they did here, but anyway. Minnesota was listed on the DraftKings report here above the Pellies, but with the same number of wins. Obviously, the big trade last year may or may not have paid off, depending on how you look at it. Karl-Anthony Towns thinks that they did some really special things, obviously more special than anything maybe that's ever happened in the NBA's history. By getting into
some might say they changed the game.
Changed the game, yeah. But 43.5 is the number. Ryan, what do you think here with Minnesota? I think they're a little bit of an enigma. I'm curious to hear your thoughts here on Minnesota and this number.
Yeah, man, it's tough. It's like every time I think about a team in the West outside of like the very bottom, I'm like, yeah, that team could go over that. I think Minnesota's is tough. Like Minnesota basically didn't have Towns pretty much 2/3 of the year, and they basically hit that number. They're one game off that number, right? But then the question becomes, does Towns make them that much better with Gobert? I don't know. I didn't see enough of it. And Bentley will remember, I was very excited to see this team after the Gobert trade because I thought it was a really unique way to build a team. You know, like some of y'all have said, zag when people were zigging or vice versa. I think it's really interesting. I think it's Anthony Edwards' team, and I think they're smart to go that. So it's Anthony Edwards' team from a talent perspective. It is not Anthony Edwards' team from a roster construction perspective, right?
Or from a podcasting perspective.
Yeah,
right.
Really, from anything except on the court.
Yeah. But I trust that Anthony Edwards is going to figure out how to play with those guys because he's going to have to because there's not a lot of other options.
Yeah.
They have no draft picks, so they're going to be trying to win as much as they can. I think there's still some guys on the market that could help them out. Saying all that, if I had to bet it, I'd probably take the under, but I would probably not bet that line. Just because it's honestly more unknown than New Orleans. New Orleans, we know what the variable is. It's like, hey, if Zion plays, we know, right? So I don't feel like bad about it that much, really, because you kind of have the known part of it. This we don't know. Karl-Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert at max they played 29 games together. I don't even think they played that much because I think they missed some games even while some of them were healthy. What does that team look like with them? I have no idea. I have no idea over a whole season. So I wouldn't touch this. This would probably be my least favorite one to even go after. Because if they won 48 games, I'd be like, yeah, sure, I saw how they could do that. And then if they won 7 games, I'd be like, yeah, I saw how that happened. I predicted that. Because I will say I predicted whichever one happens.
Of course. Right. Bentley, what do you think about the T-Wolves?
I think that in probably 15 years, when we're all millionaires off of this podcast, we will look back and say that Gobert trade was probably one of the 3 worst trades ever in NBA history. I love Anthony Edwards. It's another SEC guy. Love to see them flourish in the NBA. I think that the Gobert deal stunts his progression. I'm a little less bullish on him learning how to play with those two guys on the court at the same time. Gobert clogs the paint and is not really a scoring threat, which is not what you want when your best player is a downhill guy. So I'm taking the under. I like Mike Conley being there to kind of guide them, be the adult in the room, whatever, because Cat and Ant kind of, not a knock on them. It just, from everything I've seen and read, they kind of need that sort of mentorship in the locker room, and I don't think that Gobert is the guy to do that. Gobert takes away the things that Cat does best on the offensive end of the floor. Like, Cat's a guy that operates – he can shoot, obviously, with the best of them. He's an elite shooter. But for him to be at his max, he needs space to operate.
Yeah.
And same with Ant. And Gobert just takes that away. And so I think that they will struggle to kind of find that cohesion. They may honestly be better off just trading Cat because they don't have any draft capital, like Ryan said. And Cat would at least bring something back, and then just let Ant be 98% of their offense and just run downhill all the time. So I'm taking the under. They could be really bad, and it wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, I'm taking the under on this one as well. Improving on last year, I don't see it. If they get to 42 wins again this year, sure. But I think they're going to be in the high 30s, 37, 38. I get the uniqueness of the way to assemble this roster, but Bentley, you mentioned it, he kind of clogs up what you want Ant and Cat to be doing, what they do best. You can't trade him. Nobody else wants him. You were the only sucker that was going to take Rudy Gobert off of Utah's hands, and Utah ended up, really fleecing Minnesota, in my opinion, in that trade. If they come out and win 50 games and it's, it works because – I don't know, Cat can just not play defense because Rudy's in the middle, but I really don't know how it works offensively, and we didn't get to see it last year, right? So we don't have that kind of guidepost to tell us, oh, this is going to work, or nope, this is not going to work. I'm leaning toward it's not going to work because of how much of a liability Gobert is offensively and how much of a liability he is defensively, in terms of you can really take him away from the bucket and really neutralize anything that Rudy Gobert can do. Defensive Player of the Year, 2 times I think he won it, in a different NBA, right? With a different Jazz team that played a different style. This is not that Jazz team. This is not that NBA of 6-8 years ago. So I think you can really neutralize anything that Gobert brings to the table in terms of an addition to this T-Wolves team. And I've got them taking a pretty decent step back. And possibly, you mentioned the trade at the deadline, trading away an asset. I don't think it's Ant. It could be Cat. Maybe they're sellers and Cat ends up going somewhere at the deadline, because I think that they're going to realize about halfway through this season that this isn't working. We've got to try again, and we've just got to kind of coast until this Gobert salary fucking goes away, because I just look at him as too much of a liability for this team. All right, sliding up the scale here again, Sacramento also at 43.5 wins. I think they are probably, of any of these teams remaining here on the board, probably the one that captures everybody's kind of intrigue more so than other teams, because of what we saw from them at the end of last season. The light the pole, or whatever it was.
Light the beam.
Beam, that's what it is, not pole, beam. Strippers dance on poles, kings like the beam. All right. Anyway, I just think the intrigue with them and how exciting they were in the playoffs, how exciting they were in that series, and when you have a thing like that, right? It gets everybody excited about, hey, we won another game. Everybody can rally around it. And I think last year we saw maybe the most growth of a budding star into a potential superstar that I can really remember over the course of a single season. Not a guy that was overlooked in the draft like a Donovan Mitchell, but a guy that's been in the league for a few years and went from, hey, this guy can play too. Holy fuck, this guy can really play in De'Aaron Fox. And it's his team clearly now. They moved Halliburton out and they made the right call. I questioned it at the time. I wasn't sure that Fox was going to be the right guy there in terms of who they moved and who they kept. But it seemed like last year it was clear that he was the guy. Bentley, what are your thoughts here on the Kings? Are you as excited as I am and as kind of the public seems to be? Or do we need to kind of pump the brakes?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that $260 million bum Halliburton. The NBA really seemed to dislike that guy a lot, huh? No, I'm super excited to watch the Kings again. I don't think this year will be as special from like a hype standpoint, because last year they kind of got the monkey off the back, getting into the playoffs again after it was like 16 or 19 years, something like that. So they kind of capped that hill. And they probably should have beaten Golden State if Sabonis doesn't play terribly in that series, because Fox did everything he could to get him over the hump. And he played out of his mind, but Sabonis didn't really give him the support that he had been giving him the entire year, you know, finishing top 10 in MVP. 43.5 feels low, feels probably like 2 games low. Should probably be like 45.5, maybe 44.5. I would take the over. I really like this team. Another year in the system under Mike Brown. They bring back basically all of the guys that were contributors last year, unless I'm forgetting somebody. And I don't think that I am. But they're bringing back almost all of their contributors from last year when they made the playoffs. And they're all decently young enough to expect some sort of, whether it's a large jump or a small jump, for them to be better next year in some capacity. Another year of chemistry between Fox and Sabonis is always a good thing. I am excited for them. I think they're going to be a lot of fun. Unfortunately, they're on the West Coast, so the game started like 11. It kind of sucks. But I am excited. I would take the over here.
Ryan, what do you think?
Bentley knows I love one specific player on this team, De'Aaron Fox.
Matthew Dellavedova.
Oh, yeah, him too. De'Aaron Fox ripped apart my high school many years ago. Not when I was there. I went to the game because he was the best player in Texas. And I was like, how good could he be? And he maybe scored the easiest 35 points I've ever seen in my life. And I was like, oh, that guy's pretty good. It's like, yeah, he's going to Kentucky. They don't just take whoever. Typically. I like this. I think this team is really built for the regular season really well. I think they're going to have some problems with the playoffs just defensively, but they're very switchable. Outside of Sabonis, I mean, Murray, if he takes a step, I really like it. Harrison Barnes can do everything. I think the team is well constructed. They shoot well. They can play with pace. They can do a lot of offensive actions with Sabonis. A lot of other teams aren't able to do. A lot of people going Jokic light. Probably less of a defensive talent than Jokic is, but I have a little bit of concern with their front court depth. I think they're going to have to go small a lot. I don't think that's going to hurt them as much in the regular season, which is what we're talking about. I just think that that will potentially have some issues in the playoffs, because really what you want is you want to go small while still having guys who can play inside, and they lose a lot of that. But I would take the over. I like these guys a lot. I think they got a ton of talent, and I think they can match up with a lot of people, especially in the backcourt, with like the Davion Mitchells that mess people up. And I like their like rotation of 8 guys a lot. I like Alex Lynn a lot. I just want to say he's a guy people forget about, but Alex Lynn can play. I think he's a good rotational big. I think they got guys, Trey Lyles. They got some guys who can contribute. It's gonna come down to who else in the West is going to beat them, but I would probably take the over on them.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, Dad, thanks for tuning in. Yeah, I'm pretty bullish on the Kings as well, like I am with the Jazz. I think they're going to get close to 50. I really think that this is a team that's built for the regular season. Ryan, you put it perfectly right. They may not have a lot of playoff success, but they're going to be an exciting team to watch the highlights the next morning, right? Because their game started at 11 o'clock at night. But they're going to be on SportsCenter. They're going to have a lot of the flashy highlight plays, and I think they're going to win a lot of games because they're built for the regular season. They can switch up and down the lineup. They can go small, and in the regular season, you put it perfectly, Ryan. You don't get hurt going small without that defensive interior presence like you do in the playoffs, right? The regular season, a little more disengaged. Coaches are doing different things, load management. You might not match up with a certain guy a certain night, that sort of thing. And I think they're going to outscore a ton of teams this year. En route to, I think they're gonna get close to, if not get to 50 wins this year. So I think they're gonna beat their number pretty early in the season. You're not gonna have to sweat this one like sweating whether or not Zion's gonna play this year.
They also what I noticed watching them a little bit last year, especially in the playoffs, was their second unit offense kind of struggled when De'Aaron Fox didn't play. So their depth at offensive playmaking point guard, and Ryan mentioned Davion Mitchell.
Yeah.
He was a really good on-ball defender on the perimeter, but they brought over the Euro League MVP, who's a point guard, and they also brought over Chris Duarte, who's an experienced NBA guy. Those are two guys I think will probably bolster their offensive capability on the second string guys coming off the bench when Fox is not playing. So I think that just is another bonus for them.
Yeah. Davion Mitchell was my favorite player during that championship run that they had. He was my favorite player to watch. He was just a nightmare defensively. The numbers he was putting up in terms of shutting down the other team's fucking point guard were unbelievable.
Yeah.
They shot like 18% against him, and their efficiency numbers were like negative infinity. Essentially, he's a junkyard dog, but they do struggle offensively with that second unit. So those additions in the offseason should help a lot. All right, sliding up the scale, Dallas. I'm going to be honest, I was a little surprised by this number, except I had to remember Ryan put the stat out that with Kyrie and Luka on the floor, they were a much better team last year than their record showed down the stretch. If they can continue to figure that out this year, maybe Vegas is onto something, right? And of course, Vegas always knows, right? You may question it, but Vegas, they always fucking know. Dallas is probably going to win 45 or 46 games this year because that's just what Vegas does. But for a team that struggled mightily down the stretch, I was a bit taken aback when I first saw this number. I'm curious how much Vegas thinks that they're going to be able to figure it out. Plus, they made some decent moves this offseason, right? You can't fault them for some of the things that they were able to do. Ryan, what are your thoughts here on Dallas? 45.5. How's that number feel for you?
That's a tough one. It's a lot of improvement, but like you said, I think they're basing this off the end of the season with Kyrie, and some of the movement around the fringe of the team that they've had, which I think has been good. We've talked about it. We like what they did in the draft. We like some of the moves. I love Josh Green, as has been established many times. I think next year he's probably going to make a leap and really help them a lot. They have my favorite below the rim protector and Maxi Kleba. I like their team, but somebody's got to be the odd man out. What I will say is I think this team will be a good playoff team. I think they're going to be probably on the low end of the West, but I think they'll be a tough team to play against in the playoffs. I'm probably going to take the under just because I have to. But from a game theory perspective, I would not be betting the middle of the West, like those 4 or 5 teams that are right next to each other. I probably wouldn't touch that unless you just really feel confident about one of them. I probably, and to include the Kings, they're in that group too. I probably wouldn't touch them because they're literally probably going to be within 2.5, 3 games of each other, all 5 guys. And it's going to be half went over and half went under. They all made the playoffs, so it doesn't really matter. They all got to play each other. So I would probably take the under, but betting against Luka is probably a mistake, so I'm probably wrong.
Yeah. Bentley, what do you think?
Ryan hit it right there at the end. Betting against Luka, never a good idea. For that reason, Oh, it pains me, but I'm going to take the over. Kyrie Irving, my least favorite Duke player of all time, played 11 games. Sorry, bum. And then just kind of for the last 3 seasons, something like that, just kind of refuses to play NBA games. Don't really know why. It'd be super cool if we could watch one of the best finishers ever. You know, maybe the sickest layup package of all time, like kind of play basketball. I didn't love the trade from a Dallas perspective when it happened last year. I saw a lot of the two of them when they didn't have the ball just standing in the corner and not moving. That's not really winning basketball to me. And I'm saying all of these things. I'm still going to take the over because I think that Luka is that good.
You did the opposite of me. I said a lot of positive things. And then
Yeah, it took the under. Yeah, I mean, but like this is a line I wouldn't bet. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not betting this line. I'm just not, unless you force me to bet an over under for every team in the league. Now, obviously, we're picking them, and I'm going to do my best to forecast what I think will actually happen. And I could easily see this team being like the 4th best team in the West, the 3rd best team in the West. Like Luka is that good. Luka, he's doing things that have only been done since LeBron was his age, right? Like he is that special, and he looks like he could also be your plumber. You know, like it's incredible the things that this man is capable of doing on a basketball court. I struggle to give you the over, but I'm going to. Like I just will. I'm taking the over. Give me a Luka season. Give me a Luka MVP season.
Ooh.
51 wins.
MVP even. All right. I'm not betting this one. Right. I'm not at all. I'd like to keep money in my wallet as much as I possibly can, so I'm not betting this one. I'm going to take the under, but I'm going to say barely. It's going to be a 44-45 win team. So if you bet the under, you're going to sweat it for the last week of the season. If you bet the over, you're going to sweat. The number just feels like the number, right? Vegas nailed this one, I think. I do think that they are a better team with an off season of Kyrie and Luka kind of figuring it out. I do wonder why the fuck we can't keep Kyrie on the floor ever. He's such an enigma, such a weird guy. For a Duke-educated fella, he feels like a tinfoil. Well, yeah, I guess educated is a loose term, right? But a guy who got into Duke, right? Like that's not easy to do.
All academics.
Yeah.
They were like, "Oh, you play basketball?"
Yeah, right.
We didn't even know. We have tryouts tomorrow. You want to come check it out?
But it just he's such a strange guy. And it is perplexing why that seems to impact his willingness to be on the floor and be engaged in the sport that early in his career and when he was at Duke, it felt like he truly loved the game of basketball, and he might, but it just feels like there's so many other things that distract him from the game of basketball that I'm confident they're going to kind of figure this thing out, but I don't know that I'm confident enough to say that I'm going to put them over 45 wins. So I'm going to stay under, but barely under, and it's going to be a sweat down the stretch for anybody who bets this line with the Mavericks.
Yep.
All right, moving up to the Memphis Grizzlies, also at 45.5. The Ja Morant less Memphis Grizzlies for 25 games, I believe, is what he got to start the season. So you're losing, just under a third of the season with Ja Morant. Big trade in the offseason, big news anyway in terms of the trade, depending on how you feel about Marcus Smart. Bring him in from Boston. I thought they had a pretty good draft also in terms of the draft picks that they actually had and how they executed them. This number keeps them relevant, but it is a 6-game regression. Of course, we're talking about a team that lost maybe the next face of the NBA, right? Ja Morant, and can't seem to figure out how to stay off fucking Instagram Live with guns or whatever it is. Ryan, what are your thoughts on Memphis here?
Yeah, this one's tough. My initial thought was to take the under, but they play so well without Ja. They're really built well. I think the trades they made probably dull the edge of losing him a little bit. I think this team was unhealthy at the end of last year. Brandon Clark was out. Steven Adams was out. Those are legitimate rotational guys, especially Steven Adams. But Brandon Clark, only got 56 games out of him. They got 42 out of Steven Adams. I like guys like Jake LaRavia. I think it's going to be a contributor. Like I think their rotation, they got a lot of guys in the wings waiting to play. I would probably take the over, which I just think about. I just like the roster. If it can stay healthy, I think even without Ja, this might be a better team than they're kind of like New Orleans, built really well around Ja, but even without him, I think they're good, and I think they're just going to get better. I think the guys that the Santi Aldamas and the Jake LaRavias and those types of guys, and some of those minutes are opening up. Dylan Brooks is gone, right? But they have arguably the best defensive player in the league. Not in Marcus Smart, but in Jaren Jackson Jr. I just like the team, and I think they're super deep. Like they can lose 3 guys, and they're probably at 90% as long as it's not Jaren Jackson Jr. But they can lose some of their fringe guys and still play. I like the team a lot, and I think Ja's going to come back, and he's going to want to show himself that he's not a mess. I think once you start hitting the pocketbook the way he's being hit, I think it's hard. There's not a lot of guys that doesn't change.
Yeah. Yep.
There's very few, and I think he has no real. It doesn't seem like he has any real like external factors that should make him like continue to make mistakes. It seems like he has a good family. He's got like, you hear about guys like Kevin Porter Jr. really struggled because he was, he was like out on his own. Like I think his dad left him, right. It's like, okay, I kind of get like there's some growing up to do there. It's not his fault. It's like John Morant is choosing to do these things, but he still has that support network. And I think when he comes back, he'll be fine. God, I hope so, because I like watching him. And it's he's being a knucklehead, as my dad would say. But yeah, I would take the over.
Yeah, Bentley, you agree?
So I'm going through this list, and I'm trying to mathematically choose teams.
Balance it out, right?
Yeah, I'm like, well, if just looking above these guys, like, there's a lot of wins up there.
Yeah, there really.
I'm not a John Morant fan. I have nothing against the guy, like the basketball player. Really, the guy either. Like, he hasn't broken any laws, so I don't. What he does on Instagram doesn't bother me one way or the other. I'm just not a. I wasn't a Russell Westbrook fan. I wasn't a Derrick Rose fan. Not really a John Morant fan. You can cut. They're not the same player, obviously, but they have a similar play style. Seems to rely a ton on his athleticism, which is fine. It's made him a shitload of money. Good for you, man. Get that bag. But you haven't won anything. Your team seems to be better without you. Now, the best point guard of that team is now in Washington. So, maybe they won't be as good without him this year. I don't particularly think that Marcus Smart makes offensive basketball teams better. I think that they take a step back. I think I take the under. Now, I fully recognize that they dealt with the jaw stuff last year, as well as Steven Adams being out for most of the second half. So they dealt with their fair share of injuries. But I think that there are teams in the West that are better this year than they were last year, specifically Oklahoma City, who I think is going to look to really compete. I think that 46 wins feels like a stretch. They could win 45 and it wouldn't shock me. 46 feels like a stretch. I know that those are only one win difference, and that's a little hypocritical of me, but I stand by what I said. I think the Vegas line is pretty accurate here. I think that 45 is probably the right number for them, which would put them at an under here. So I think an under is in play, especially given Ja. Like the things that I said, they're better without Ja, but Jones is gone to Washington now. So will they be better without Ja? Right? Should pick him up. He'd be a good spokesman.
Yeah, with all the other endorsements he lost,
Yeah,
maybe that's one to pick up, right?
Glock and Shotgun Willies. Yeah, so it will be interesting. You know, he's going to miss the first 25 games of the year. They don't have the stud backup point guard that they have last year. They did bring in Marcus Smart, who I think makes them better defensively, but not offensively. So for those conjoining reasons, I think we take the under here. Anywhere from 40 to 45, I think is probably the most realistic range for them.
Yeah, I'm with Ryan on this one. You know, I know that you pegged the number right there at 45, Bentley. For me, I like, and I'm on the record as saying I really liked the Marcus Smart trade for non-basketball reasons, right? I think he's going to clean that locker room up with Ja. I think he's a good mentor for Ja. I think he's a guy that can really bring him along and mature him and help him just kind of remember what it's like to be a professional or something, right? He doesn't come from a background that he needs this, but he's just still immature. And maybe that's part of kind of coming from privilege. Maybe you're a little spoiled and you just don't know how to fix yourself or behave or whatever. But Marcus Smart's a locker room guy, in my opinion, who's going to help a lot with Ja before he comes back after 25 games, right? And I think this team, as Ryan said, is good enough to win. Maybe they win 22 to 24 of those first 20, or not, I'm sorry, 12.
Jesus.
Sorry, 12 to 14.
Best team in the league.
I had 45 in my head when I was doing the math. 12 to 14 of those first 25 games. And I think Ja's going to come back with a vengeance, and he's going to have something to prove. And if he truly grows up from this experience, he's going to be a much better teammate, a much better locker room guy, a much better, it's going to translate to a much better performance on the court in terms of the team around him. Because as you both already said, it's weird how much the Ewing effect seems to take hold when he's out of the lineup. They just seem to always win for whatever reason. I love Bane. I'm on the record of saying that. Jaren Jackson is a game changer defensively. He can contribute offensively. His health is always a question. But for this exercise, I'm assuming health for him. I'm assuming health for Steven Adams. And I think that they're going to get to probably 48 to 50 wins. And that probably spoils some of my later regression here from the mean with some of these top teams. But I look at them and I think that's a really well constructed roster. Bane got his bag, and I think he's going to take another step forward. He's, one of the better perimeter defenders in the league, and sneaky. People probably don't know, but he finished in the top 30 in scoring this year for guards. So he's one of the better scoring guards in the NBA quietly. I really like the roster composition. I like what Marcus Smart can do in non-basketball ways. And I like what he contributes. You're not going to ask him to bring the ball up and be your point guard, your playmaker. You're not going to ask him to be a guy that's going to go score you 20 to 30 points a game. You're going to ask him to be a pest. You're going to ask him to be fucking Pat Bev light defensively. And then you're going to ask him to maybe knock down a clutch three here and there. And that's all Boston ever asked him to do. And that's what made him such a valuable piece for them. And I think that's what he's going to bring to Memphis.
Their concern is going to be, can they score in the half court? That's
without Ja, absolutely.
I mean, even with Ja, they're not good in the half court. They're bad in the half court. They do
end up with a lot of short clocks, and Ja just finding a way to flail at the rim.
Yeah, you're throwing stuff up. I mean, if they can just be just slightly below average in the half court, they'll pass that number. That's just, they got to get to that point. And I like their coach. I think they will. Just that's probably their swing issue right now.
Yeah. So we've got a very dad-like question in the chat. And as somebody who has felt the wrath of some of these calibration speeches when I was messing up as a child, my dad's curious about why Kyrie's father hasn't had a talk with him about his play. And I'll preface this before I go to you guys to kind of, somebody needs to be that mentor for him. I don't know what his family dynamic is. I don't know that any of us really know what the family dynamic is, but like that father figure, that mentor, for me, I think he seems like a guy who doesn't take well to stuff like that, right? I just think he's his own kind of enigmatic person, and that's probably why, even if somebody was to have those conversations with him, it's probably why things didn't work in Cleveland with him and LeBron. LeBron was probably having those conversations with him, and that's why he wanted to run away. I want to be the man. I want to be the man, right? Ryan, what are your kind of thoughts here on Kyrie, and can anybody really get to him?
Yeah, I think we have as some great philosophers have said, we have a issue with intellectualism in this country, and it's not too many. That's not the issue. The internet has allowed us to be idiots in the open, and there's been plenty of idiots throughout NBA history who, caused problems and stayed in the league for a long time. And they continue to cause problems, but talent will overrule those problems. And Kyrie's probably the best troublemaker that's played in the NBA ever. He's got to be up there. The Rasheed Wallaces of the world, and there's a ton of guys back in the day that had these issues. But yeah, I mean, his dad raised him by himself. He definitely was a basketball mentor. His dad was a great basketball player. And I think like Kyrie was thrown into a world that he was not prepared for. And some people's minds just work that way. It's like, hey, I've been told this. I watched this movie. Now I believe this. And that's like, most people are like that. Most people just don't say it out loud. Yeah. He has the platform. Yeah. Like if you went and polled the average person, like watch this very offensive movie, but don't tell them it's offensive. Just be like, here's a movie someone made. People will be like, oh yeah, this must be true. It's a documentary, right? Like I'm just using this one example, but it's very easy for someone to end up like that.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's his dad's responsibility to be like, hey, you need to fix this. Like, who knows how his dads feel? Yeah, it's okay to keep your opinions to yourself sometimes, but that's not the world we live in. Yeah. And that's just, what we have to deal with. I don't think it's his dad's problem. I think his dad has done a good job raising his son. At this point, he has to live it. It's his manager's fault. It's his PR guys. That's whose fault it is. Yeah. It's like, hey, you can be a black nationalist if you want. Just don't tell anybody.
Just like in front of a camera.
Yeah, like that's fine. I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying like that's the extreme, right? Like there are guys that have played professional basketball who were black nationalists, and some of them were open about it. And it's like, I refuse to play with white guys. Like there were guys that have done that. Like they played because they got paid. But like he's not the first, and he won't be the last. I don't think he's a terrible guy. I think he just has been wrapped up in a world where he wants to be the savior for a lot of people and for his people, which is completely understandable. But that comes with so much external factors.
Oh yeah,
that I don't think he knows how to navigate because he never was taught, because he didn't go to school to learn critical thinking and those types of things.
Yeah, those are tough waters to navigate for sure. Bentley, what are your thoughts here? You're the Duke fan. That's why I left you for last here, and you got to watch him firsthand. My brother's a Duke fan, and he's had some interesting, he's found him very, confusing, confounding as somebody who went to one of the higher. It's a doctoral college, right? It's a tough university to get into. But he just seems to be, as Ryan put it, just maybe confused and not sure how to convey his thoughts properly, or it properly probably isn't the right word, right? But at least in front of a camera, handling yourself in a mature fashion as somebody who, kids look up to, etc. What are your thoughts here on Kyrie, man?
Yeah, so I'll preface the rest of my statement by saying that I don't think that Kyrie has ill will towards any particular group.
That's fair.
He doesn't strike me as that type of person. Obviously, I don't know him personally. There's like 6 degrees of separation between people that I know and, whatever. But again, I don't know him personally, right? He doesn't strike me as a person that wishes harm upon others. He does strike me as a person who is borderline gullible. I think that if you are able to speak to him and make a compelling statement one way or the other, then it's likely that he will believe you in that statement. And you could say the fucking cows are yellow. And he's like, dude, you're right. Like, I know what yellow is, and I know those cows are not yellow, but you told me the cows are yellow, so they're starting to look pretty yellow. And as long as you can present him with enough fabricated evidence to convince him of that, like he strikes me as the type of person who's going to jump on board fully, right? So I think that he was just kind of misguided in some of the things that he quote studied and researched potentially. And he just has a platform that's so massive. He has so many fans. So many people love Kyrie Irving, the basketball player, that they kind of gobble it up. And then the people that see it and are kind of like checked by it, like, oh, wait a minute, what are we doing? When they push back, they receive so much vitriol that it just kind of snowballs and rolls, and then more people understand like what it is that Kyrie was saying and the movie that he posted, and sure he didn't support it, quote unquote, but like when you post it on your social media, that's you basically supporting that, right? So that's kind of the world we live in. So I don't think he had ill will or bad intentions. I just think it was sort of misguided.
Yeah.
And he got caught up in a situation, like Ryan said, that he just wasn't prepared for. Which is weird because he's 30, and you think you'd probably be prepared for stuff like that at this age. But, you know, whatever.
Well, to be fair, we're in our 30s, and we're woefully.
Yeah, you're a fucking idiot. So.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to add one thing. There's a guy named Warren Jabali who played in the 70s, who was maybe Kyrie Irving to an extreme. He was very talented, not as talented as Kyrie, but he was an all-star player. Had the most extreme opinions, would literally fight anybody he disagreed with. So these guys have existed. Look him up. He has insane. If you want to feel okay about Kyrie, he's not a bad person to be like, oh, he played 12 years like professionally. He's fine.
Yeah. And Bentley, you mentioned the social media stuff. Last point on Kyrie. That's where, as Ryan put it, the manager comes in, right? Like keep him under control, in that forum for sure.
Promote your Chinese fashion brand and then move on with it.
Right. All right. Moving on with the Lakers, 48.5. I have to feel like this number feels like kind of a momentum continuation from last year. They struggled to get into the playoffs last year. The trades, I think, made some good headway for them. But this is a team that, I look at it, they're aging. Anthony Davis is still, the Anthony Davis we know to miss a bunch of time. Is he going to play a lot more this year? Is LeBron going to continue to fight off the hands of time? Bentley, what are your thoughts on the Lakers, 48.5?
I think that we got a taste of playoff LeBron last year, even though he was injured. But the LeBron James of feet said he was good to go. So, was he really injured? Was he hurt or injured? Embrace debate. I've taken the under, just kind of, to preface it, to get out in front of it. I'm taking the under. I'm not going to bet on year 21. Yeah, going into year 21, LeBron and glass fucking bones, Anthony Davis, Anthony Street Clothes Davis, I think, as Stephen A. called him. I'm not betting on those guys giving me a full year with a bunch of wins, but I'm taking the under. I don't expect them to play the full year.
Yeah, Ryan, what do you think about the Lakers?
Yeah, I think I really like the way they're constructed. I said before I liked how they were at the end of the year. I like them a lot, and the only thing I think that will get them to that if Anthony Davis plays the center position primarily, and that's about it. Yeah, I would take. I would probably take the over because I have to pick somebody to be over. But I like their team a lot, and if they go small and play the guys that they had last year, I like them. I think they're a top 4 West team.
Yeah, I'm not buying 48.5. I don't trust LeBron's age. I don't trust Anthony Davis to play 60 games. I think he played, 48 last year, I believe, and even that was kind of him in and out, load management, rotation at times. I think LeBron, we saw last year the kind of kink in the armor when it came to age catching up. The LeBron James feet, as Bentley alluded to here, kind of fixed him up toward the end of the season, but you can only continue to patch things up for so long. I will say I do think they still get in the 40s. They're going to take a step back from this number, but I think they're going to have the same number they had last year. 43, I think, is the right number for them this year. Finishing somewhere in the 6, 7, 8 range in the West, maybe depending on how everything else falls out. But 6, 7, 8, I think, in the standings, making it into the playoffs, being a dangerous team in a 7-game series because of who they've got on the roster. I love the roster composition. I think they've done a much better job than some teams in the past that have had LeBron on their team to build a sustainable model going forward. I think Rui and some of the other young players that they were able to, piece together last year at the end of the year bode well for them in the future to be able to sustain some of this as long as they can continue to put stars on this team. And it's LA, it's the Lakers, but 43 for me with them, I think, is where they're going to wind up, a few short of the number that Vegas has got for them. Golden State, 49.5. This feels like a reputation line to me, but I'm really curious to hear your guys' thoughts. Ryan, what do you think about Golden State, 49.5?
Yeah, I would take the under pretty quickly. I hate Golden State. I hate everything they stand for.
Just winning and good basketball.
Yeah, I just think they're really small right now, and I think that is a concern. I think, and you'll hear me say this again with Phoenix, but I think they've increased risk with the way their roster is built. They've reduced depth in a lot of ways in their front court. Andrew Wiggins might have to be playing the 4 every now and then, and unless Moses Moody and Kuminga can be contributors, I don't like the depth. Maybe Trace Jackson Davis does that for him, but I don't like that number. I think I have to pick somebody to be down, and those are the guys that I would say are down. Klay Thompson's not himself anymore. Yeah, I just, like you said, I think it's reputation. But I think they'll be 500, around 500, right above it, somewhere in there.
Bentley, what do you think?
I would take the under as well. I think they win in the 40s, probably like 46, 47, something like that. Maybe 45, 46, 47. Somewhere in that range, I think is probably more accurate. I don't think they win 50 games. They don't. The Chris Paul thing didn't move the needle a whole lot for me in my kind of projection to next year. It's cool. It's fun to talk about. Not really a super fruitful addition, in my opinion. Yeah, I'm going under here. The Vegas line just juiced them up because it's Golden State is what they do.
Yeah, for sure. I'm with you guys. I think Klay Thompson is really, really close to being a rotation guy off the bench. I think he's becoming close to being a liability for that team. And of course, his reputation continues to keep him in the starting rotation for them. This line feels very much like, oh, this is the Warriors. We're going to try to get some money, right? Get people to bet the line, and use some of that reputation for the Warriors, for Vegas, to make money. The Paul move, does it take some pressure off maybe Steph in terms of ball handling? Sure. Defensively, can Chris Paul still do it to a certain extent? But I just look at this team and I think, man, this is sort of a slow team and a small team, and I don't know that they're going to be able to do a lot of the things that they want to do offensively. Draymond is not the same guy he's been in years past defensively as well to make up for a lot of those mistakes. I'm pretty low on them. I think 42 to 44 wins is where I'm going to have them, which also mathematically helps me make up for some of the other ones I was a little more bullish on. Sure, ask away. Yeah, I think they're gonna try to manage. They're gonna try like heck to manage Steph's numbers. I just, they have to. right? Because in years past, he's been hurt, and they've been a really, really bad team without him. So I just think that managing the minutes, I don't know what's going on in the chat there. We got some weird stuff in the chat, but I think unless either of you, I don't think they're going to try to force Steph to play too many minutes, right?
I think the team's constructed for him to play less minutes. They're really deep in the backcourt, really soft in the front court. So it's like the opposite. Yeah. Draymond is going to have to play too many minutes. That's my concern.
I think that's probably that, and I think they're going to ask a lot more of some of the other guys that they might not be able to rely on. All right, moving up, Phoenix, 51.5. I think the hype train, especially, we've talked a lot about who else is going to play on this team. Are they just going to play 5-on-4, or are they just going to play 48 minutes a night with their big stars? Bentley, what are your thoughts here? Phoenix, 51.5. That's a lot of wins.
So this entire podcast, I've had them at an under, and spur of the moment decision, I'm going to take them on the over.
Okay.
Now
that
Booker and Ayton are durable guys. They play a lot of games. Ayton less than Booker, but I mean, he's still more durable than Beal and Durant. If they can get any semblance of durability out of Durant and Beal, and Eric Gordon plays a lot of games too. I think this team could be really, really special on offense and probably better on defense than some people expect. Booker was really good on defense in the playoffs last year. So they just have a ton of talent. They have a ton of offense. It wouldn't shock me if they win like 53, 54 games. So I think you're safe with the over here. I think the top two teams on this list, probably the cream of the crop in the West. So they could win a lot of games, I think.
Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to take the under. I think they've created too much risk with consolidating the roster. I do like the ads they've had, but I think they're an injury away from a problem.
Yep, 100%. And I think they've got two guys on that roster that are vital to this number and are huge risks in terms of their health. As a Wizards fan, Bentley, you and I have seen it firsthand, right? Bradley Beal just misses time. He misses time. He's not a reliable guy. Maybe it's partially being in Washington where, it's bad basketball that doesn't kind of give him the onus to play through some of these nagging injuries. Maybe he does with Phoenix, but I haven't seen it in the past, and I can't believe that it's going to change. But I will say, if Durant and Beal give them 60 to 65 games and they're healthy, this team could win 60, right? This team could win 55 to 60 games because they are going to fucking score. They are going to score a ton of points. All right. Looking at Denver, 54.5. Obviously defending champions here, defending champions in the West and the NBA. 54.5 is the number. 55 wins is a lot of wins, but it keeps them close to what they were last year at 53. Where you got them, Ryan? How's this number?
Yeah, the concern when you win the championship, as Bill Simmons would say, is the law of more. I want more minutes. I want more money, and I forget what the other one is. I want more women. I don't know what it is. Something like that.
No money, no problem.
Yeah. So, but they've really avoided that with the way they're constructed. Right? They're pretty solid. Really losing Brown, I think, hurts them a little bit, but not that much. I think Christian Brown will kind of take that role, and I think Peyton Watson will take the Christian Brown role. I think they'll kind of just move those guys because they should fit into that pretty well. I still like their team. I think they're probably still the best constructed team, and they're really built for the next couple of years. And they're all kind of in their peak around the same time, which is, super valuable. So I would take the over. I think they're the favorites to win the West.
Bentley, what do you think?
Yeah, I would take the over as well. They could win 62 games. It wouldn't shock me. They're a great team. They have the best player in the world. They have the best two-man game in the world. They have a really good coach. MPJ, in theory, will take a linear leap forward, as Ryan likes to call it. Yeah, they're the best in the West. They're going to win a lot of games. Take the over.
Yeah, I'm going to take the over. I wanted to be super heavy on them, but I had to temper that because of some of the other teams that I was a bit more bullish on. So 56 to 58 wins probably for this team. I could see them get to 60, but I'm not going to pick them to win 60 games because the math doesn't add up for me. They feel like they're the class of the West. They feel like they're the best team probably in the NBA. Still, even losing a guy like Bruce Brown, who was pretty crucial for them in the playoffs in terms of what he gave them. But as Ryan said, they've got some guys that I think are going to step into those roles, right? Christian Brown's going to take a step forward. I think MPJ in flashes in the playoffs seemed like a guy that, hey man, if he just reins in some of that kind of fucking vacuum shit that he does on offense, he could become a really, really, really important piece, for a team that could be establishing a bit of a dynasty here, right? They've got some guys locked up, right? Long-term deals for important players. This could be a team that's on the brink of possibly becoming a little bit of a dynastic run here. So I'm on the over, not a lot over, but give me mid to high 50s and we're good to go here. All right, let's bring some closing thoughts. Let's bring it home. Ryan, what do you got for us, man, on our way out the door?
Well, I'm watching the Rockets right now, and they are winning, about to be undefeated in the summer league. So I'm now taking the Rockets for the over.
Title
because summer league success is clearly indicative of regular season success. The Trailblazers won summer league last year, and I'm pretty sure won the championship if I remember correctly.
Yes, they did actually.
That's why Dame wants to stay so bad.
Yes. Right. Thanks, guys.
They won the title and the number 3 pick. It's crazy.
What about you, Bentley? What you got for us on the way out the door?
I have no idea if my picks lined up mathematically with overs and unders, just based off of how many times teams in the West play each other. As a noted numbers guy myself, I should be better at tracking things like that, but I just didn't. I hope that my predictions are correct, and I hope that you don't hold them against me if I'm incorrect. Go Wizards, and it's almost football season, baby.
Yeah, we're going to bring the degeneracy full circle. I'm putting in a parlay right now with Bentley's picks, and we're going to see how it does.
Oh, God.
If I can't retire when the season's over, Bentley, we're going to have a conversation.
All right, first sprint ride is on you.
All right, well, I appreciate you guys. For Bentley, for Ryan, this has been another off-season episode of Backyard Buckets. Appreciate all the comments in the chat, all the interaction. Really makes the show go smoothly, and we'd love to hear it. So thank you all. We are